re-unify AM 640. Bill Handel here on a Tuesday, September 5th. Boy, what a couple of days it has been. This morning, Attorney General Jeff Sessions rescinded DACA. Done, finish. I'll talk more about that at 9:30 because we have some specifics that I want to share with you. And then on Sunday, sort of cataclysmic biblical news, biblical proportion news, and that is that North Korea, as was expected, tested another device, a nuclear device. It called it a hydrogen bomb, which would make it a thermonuclear device. I watch a lot of quiz shows, so I know that one. And they're saying, and even I think seismologists around the world are saying this is 6, 7, 8 times bigger than the Nagasaki bomb, which doesn't make it a particularly large bomb when you think about the hydrogen bombs that have been tested at Bikini Island, for example. But it sure means a lot. Brian Suits with Tactical Tuesday is with us. No surprise here at all, right, Brian?
Well, it kind of was a surprise because it was the thought that just a slightly bigger A-bomb was going to be tested for test number 6. And what happened on Saturday morning was that the North Korean party state newspaper, the Rodong Sinmun, they began the day, Saturday our time around noon with a front page picture of Kim Jong-un examining what was described as an H-bomb. And there was a huge kerfuffle in the non-proliferation and defense intelligence networks and world for about 4 hours. And it was, good Lord, what is this thing? This is a fake. Anyone can make this in a machine shop. And then around 8:30 p.m. our time Saturday night, exactly at noon and 1 second in North Korea, just to make sure it wasn't, an earthquake, Kim Jong-un sent that message that it was noon and 1 second. They lit off a device that created a 6.3 earthquake, which was the last one last year. The A-bomb they did last year was a 5.1. So we know this from the Richter scale in Southern California that a 5 is 10 times bigger than a 4, and a 6 is 10 times bigger than a 5. So the North Koreans proved that they created something that was an order of magnitude bigger than an A-bomb. So there's no debate about this, that this guy tested an H-bomb. Now, it may not be the thing that was pictured Saturday morning. It may not be the thing that they want to fit on a top of a missile, but it was the largest explosion that they've ever done, and most experts are agreeing, yeah, this is some kind of boosted or H-bomb device. Now,
based on what you said, obviously there is a high-end limit to what an atomic bomb can do. And Kim Jong-un reached that last time around. So this has to be an H-bomb. Is that fair to say?
Probably. And, I mean, for all intents and purposes for Los Angeles, the bomb he tested last year would create a 5-mile diameter destruction zone in downtown L.A. This one that he tested on Saturday night would be a 20-mile destruction zone. So it's almost for us a distinction without a difference.
Yeah, it makes sense, other than the way they're moving. And it sure looked like, if that was the device, it sure looked like that device would have no problem being put in the cone of a intercontinental ballistic missile.
Yeah, and that was the purpose of the design. And the blast was so big it was felt in Vladivostok, Russia. It created there was earthquake damage in China. 10 minutes after the blast, there was a 4.7 earthquake that was caused by a cave-in of the void that the H-bomb made under the ground. And I mean, everyone's convinced. The Chinese agree that was an H-bomb. The Russians are saying that was H-bomb. And then today, Putin said, "Look, diplomacy will do nothing. They will eat grass before they give up their nuclear weapons." So he's blunt and to the point on that.
So and I want to talk about that too, because the response, the American response is as tepid as it has ever been, or let's say the response isn't tepid, or the verbal response, but it's sort of who's kidding. Everything from Mattis talking about we're going to go in there and we have everything's on the table and we have overwhelming military force, which we do. You have Nikki Haley, UN ambassador, saying that Kim Jong-un is begging for war. And then you have Donald Trump saying that's enough, we're done. And none of that is true, is it?
No, and in fact, Mattis on Sunday said any credible threat to any American or allied territory, including Guam, will be met with overwhelming force.
Yeah.
So he said threat, not attack. But he said threat. That, in other words, people are parsing what he said. Is it a change in the no first use policy, or is he saying that we will reserve the right to conventionally, preemptively attack you if you threaten with nukes? And that sounds like what he said on Sunday.
Yeah, but the threat has already been there, and I have to assume that when Mattis or Nikki Haley speaks on behalf of the administration, those are very carefully well-chosen words. No one speaks just shooting from the hip, except for, of course, President Trump. Yeah.
No, President Mattis, when he says threat will be, we will respond to a threat with overwhelming force, I don't think there's a lot of gray area there.
Yeah, and then we have, of course, the president line in the sand a couple of times, and nothing is happening. So I want to do is take a break and come back, because Putin has said something that's extraordinary. I don't think he's ever gone that far. And then the issue of China. And China maybe is getting really pissed off, but that could just be for public consumption. And we're going to come back with Brian on this one, Tactical Tuesdays. KFI AM 640. KFI AM 640. Handle here, September 5th on a Tuesday. Brian Suits is with us with Tactical Tuesday. Sunday was a rather big day when it comes to all things military and geopolitical. And that is anticipatorily, we anticipated it. North Vietnam did set off what is now being regarded as a hydrogen bomb, and it was being tested. And now the response. Russia has come down very hard, said, okay, done. Not that they're going to do anything about it. The big story is China. And Brian, real quickly, is China prepared, and it looks that way, to let Kim Jong-un develop a robust atomic weapons program, including the missiles that can be launched to deliver them?
It looks like the Chinese are prepared to live next door to an H-bomb country.
And that means, why is that? Let's talk about that, because obviously they think they're better off.
The deal is the Chinese are weighing everything, and all things told, they're saying, you know what, the cost of removing this is actually greater than the compromise of living with it. And that's an attitude that we don't have, and we're 5,000 miles away. But the Chinese are right next door, and they actually think we can live with this. And this is even with the knowledge, and part of the reason is because the Chinese can live with the North Koreans splitting us from South Korea. That's their immediate strategic goal, is to get us out of South Korea. The Chinese can live with that. In fact, it's one of their goals. And then goal number two, the North Koreans want to reunify by force with South Korea, and the Chinese don't want to see that. That actually is their line. Our line is don't threaten us or Japan, don't threaten South Korea, and don't try to split us with South Korea. The Chinese line is don't reunify.
Now, the Chinese, and we've talked about this before, they look at North Korea as a great buffer and want to that entire area, the South Seas area, they want to control, the South China Sea. They want to control. But do they really believe there's any risk of us going in and somehow being militarily opposed to China?
No, but they're just looking at history, and they're looking at Carthage versus Rome, which is something we don't do. The Chinese are just looking at this gigantic sphere of influence, and that they see a future where China dominates it, and the United States gets back to the eastern part of the Pacific and never comes back west of Pearl Harbor again.
So as far as China is concerned, they will live with it, the way you interpret it, reluctantly, as opposed to putting in sanctions and saying you can do whatever the hell you want, but the atomic weapons are off the table. They're not going that far, which they could go.
Yeah. The Chinese, the ultimate Chinese strategic goal is, hey, let's keep doing trade with the United States, but don't surround us with bases and call them Japan and South Korea and Australia. We're surrounded by airstrips and naval bases with the American flag. And 50 years from now, we want those all gone, but we want to keep doing trade with you. That's their attitude, and it's completely anathema to the way Americans think, and that's the big dividing line between us and China.
It's also counterintuitive because we have had bases there ever since World War II, and lots of them before China was ever able to deal with them in a defensive posture. And since then, our trade with China, they become our biggest trading partner. So you would think that everybody would be happy and snug, and everybody has to deal with North Korea with the nukes.
Yeah, absolutely. But again, to China, we've only had bases for 70 years in the Western Pacific. To China, that's a blink in their history. And their orientation is, hey, that's been the South China Sea for 5,000 years. Where do you get off sailing through there? And until we understand where they're coming from on that, we're going to continue thinking that, we're on the edge of some, great conflict. The Chinese orientation is, hey, we own that. But meanwhile, Vietnam, South Korea, Japan, Philippines, Brunei, Australia, the rest of the world around the South China Sea thinks those are international waters and that North Korea is a menace. China is saying that's our ocean and North Korea is not a menace. So it's like bizarro upside down backwards world.
Yeah, it really doesn't make any sense. And what happens to China in the event that Kim Jong-un is out of his mind and actually unleashes some kind of a military move? China's going to suffer as much as anybody.
Yeah, and again, their orientation is, well, we've done it in the past. We've lost hundreds of thousands in the past fighting Korea 1,000 years ago. We can do it again tomorrow. And but they're not in a position to lose thousands of men, not in the era of the one-child policy. And they're actually very loss-averse. And that's part of what drives their decision to live with North Korea, is that they know darn well that they don't want to go to war over that.
And do they actually look at the possibility of North Korea and China going to war?
They don't think that's a possibility because they think that North Korea would lose too much. I think they're underestimating the hubris and the arrogance of Kim Jong-un. Now that he has H-bombs, even the Soviet Union didn't blackmail us with H-bombs. They never said, okay, the 72 men's basketball gold medal, goes to Russia and don't debate it. North Korea looks at this as the ultimate leverage, and they're putting off this vibe like, hey, we'll use it at the drop of a hat. The Chinese don't do that. We don't do that. Pakistan doesn't do that.
Yeah.
India doesn't do that. No one with an H-bomb does that.
Yeah, well, you have one guy who can just not only press the button, and no one else going to disagree with him. They're going to run to see who unloads it first. Brian, every Saturday and Sunday, Saturday night here on KFI from 10 to midnight, Sunday from, 8 to 10 on Saturday night, and 10 to midnight on Sunday. Do I have that right?
That's the one. Super hyper local Sundays, 8 to 10 p.m.
I knew that. Okay.
Sunday night.
All right. Fair enough. Usually I get that right. So it's, whatever. All right. Coming up this morning, a couple of hours ago, Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General,